Hello and welcome back to more Mythology. Today we're going to finish up the last of the Greek legends here. And after that, I believe it's got some information on Norse mythology and then just the lineages. So, yeah, with that, let's just go ahead here and hop into this. Hero and Leander. Leander was a youth of Abydos, a town in the Hellespont. Hero was a priestess of Aphrodite in Cestus on the opposite shore. Every night Leander swam across to her, guided by the light, some say of the lighthouse in Cestus, some of a torch Hero always set blazing on top of a tower. One very stormy night the light was blown out by the wind and Leander perished. His body washed up on the shore and Hero, finding it, killed herself. The Hyades, the daughters of Atlas and half-sisters of the Pleiades. They were the rainy stars, supposed to bring rain because the time of their evening and morning setting, which comes in early May and November, is usually rainy. They were 6 in number. Dionysus, as a baby, was entrusted to them by Zeus, and to reward them for their care, he set them among the stars. Ibycus and the Cranes. He is not a mythological character, but a poet who lived around 550 BC. Only a very few fragments of his poems have come down to us. All that is known of him is the dramatic story of his death. He was attacked by robbers near Corinth and mortally wounded. A flock of cranes flew by overhead, and he called on them to avenge him. Soon after, over the open theater in Corinth, where a play was being performed to a full house, a flock of cranes appeared hovering above the crowd. Suddenly a man's voice was heard. He cried out as if panic-stricken, "The cranes of Ibycus, the avengers!" The audience in turn shouted, "The murderer has informed against himself." The man was seized, the other robbers discovered, and all put to death. Leto or Latona. She is the daughter of the Titans Phoebe and Coeus. Zeus loved her, but when she was about to bear a child, he abandoned her, afraid of Hera. All countries and islands, afraid for the same reason, refused to receive her and give her a place where her child could be born. On and on she wandered in desperation until she reached a bit of land which was floating on the sea. It had no foundation, but was tossed hither and thither by waves and winds. It was called Delos, and besides being of all islands the most insecure, it was rocky and barren. But when Leto set foot on it and asked for refuge, the little isle welcomed her gladly, and at that moment 4 lofty pillars rose from the bottom of the sea and held it firmly anchored forever. There Leto's children were born, Artemis and Phoebus Apollo, and in after years Apollo's glorious temple stood there, visited by men from all over the world. The barren rock was called the heaven-built isle, and from being the most despised, it became the most renowned of islands. Linus. In the Iliad, a vineyard is described with youths and maidens singing as they gather the fruit. A sweet Linus song. This was probably a lament for the young son of Apollo and Psamathe. Linus, who was deserted by his mother, brought up by shepherds, and before he was full grown, torn to pieces by dogs. This Linus was, like Adonis and Hyacinthus, a type of all lovely young life that dies or is withered before it has borne fruit. The Greek word elenon means woe for Linus. Grew to mean no more than the English alas, and was used in any lament. There was another Linus, the son of Apollo and a muse, who taught Orpheus and tried to teach Hercules, but was killed by him. Marpessa. She was more fortunate than other maidens beloved of the gods. Idas, one of the heroes of the Caledonian hunt, and also one of the Argonauts, carried her off from her father with her consent. They would have lived happily ever after, but Apollo fell in love with her. Idas refused to give her up and even dared to fight with Apollo for her. Zeus parted them and told Marpessa to choose which she would have. She chose the mortal, fearing, certainly not without reason, that the gods would not be faithful to her. Marsyas. The flute was invented by Athena, but she threw it away because in order to play it she had to puff out her cheeks and disfigure her face. Marsyas, a satyr, found it and played so enchantingly upon it that he dared to challenge Apollo to a contest. The god won, of course, and punished Marsyas by flaying him. Melampus. He saved and reared 2 little snakes when his servants killed the parent snakes, and as pets they repaid him well. Once, when he was asleep, they crept upon his couch and licked his ears. He started up in a great fright, but found that he understood that what 2 birds on his windowsill were saying to each other. The snakes had made him able to understand the language of all flying and all creeping creatures. He learned in this way the art of divination as no other ever had, and became a famous soothsayer. He saved himself, too, by his knowledge. His enemies once captured him and kept him a prisoner in a little cell. While there, he heard the worm saying that the roof beam had been almost gnawed through, so that it would soon fall and crush all beneath it. At once, he told his captors and asked to be moved elsewhere. They did as he said, and directly afterward the roof fell in. Then they saw how great a diviner he was, and they freed and rewarded him. Merope. Her husband, Cresphontes, a son of Hercules and king of Messina, was killed in a rebellion together with 2 of his sons. The man who succeeded him, Polyphontes, took her as his wife, but her 3rd son, Aephitus had been hidden by her in Arcadia. He returned years later, pretending to be a man who had slain Aephitus, and was kindly received therefore by Polyphontes. His mother, however, not knowing who he was, planned to kill her son's murderer, as she thought him. However, in the end, she found out who he was, and the two together brought about Polyphontes' death. Aephitus became king. The Myrmidons, these were men created from ants on the island of Aegina in the reign of Aeacus, Achilles' grandfather, and they were Achilles' followers in the Trojan War. Not only were they thrifty and industrious, as one would suppose from their origin, but they were also brave. They were changed into men from ants because of one of Hera's attacks of jealousy. She was angry because Zeus loved Aegina, the maiden from whom the island was named, and whose son Aeacus became its king. Hera sent a fearful pestilence which destroyed the people by thousands. It seemed that no one would be left alive. Aeacus climbed to the lofty temple of Zeus and prayed to him, reminding him that he was his son and the son of a woman the god had loved. As he spoke, he saw a troop of busy ants. "Oh, Father," he cried, "make these creatures a people for me, as numerous as they, and fill my empty city." A peal of thunder seemed to answer him, and that night he dreamed that he saw the ants being transformed into human shape. At daybreak, his son Telamon woke him, saying that a great host of men was approaching the palace. He went out and saw a multitude, as many as the ants in number, all crying out that they were his faithful subjects. So Aegina was repopulated from an anthill, and its people were called Myrmidons after the ant, Myrmex, from which they had sprung. Nisus and Scylla. Nisus, king of Megara, had on his head a purple lock of hair which he had been warned never to cut. The safety of his throne depended on his preserving it. Minos of Crete laid siege to his city, but Nisus knew that no harm would come to it as long as he had the purple lock. His daughter Scylla used to watch Minos from the city wall, and she fell madly in love with him. She could think of no way to make him care for her except by taking her father's lock of hair to him and enabling him to conquer the town. She did this. She cut it from her father's head in his sleep, and carrying it to Minos, she confessed what she had done. He shrank from her in horror and drove her out of his sight. When the city had been conquered and the Cretans launched their ships to sail home, she came rushing to the shore, mad with passion, and leaping into the water, seized the rudder of the boat that carried Minos. But at this moment a great eagle swooped down upon her. It was her father, whom the gods had saved by changing him into a bird. In terror she let go her hold and would have fallen into the water, but suddenly she too became a bird. Some god had pity on her, traitor though she was, because she had sinned through love. Orion. He was a young man of gigantic stature and great beauty and a mighty hunter. He fell in love with the daughter of the king of Chios, and for love of her he cleared the island of wild beasts. The spoils of the chase he brought always home to his beloved, whose name is sometimes said to be Arrow, sometimes Merope. Her father, Oenopion, agreed to give her to Orion, but he kept putting the marriage off. One day, when Orion was drunk, he insulted the maiden, and Oenopion appealed to Dionysus to punish him. The god threw him into a deep sleep, and Oenopion blinded him. The oracle told him, however, that he would be able to see again if he went to the east and let the rays of the rising sun fall on his eyes. He went as far east as Lemnos, and there he recovered his sight. Instantly he started back to Chios to take vengeance on the king. But he had fled, and Orion could not find him. He went on to Crete and lived there as Artemis's huntsman. Nevertheless, in the end, the goddess killed him. Some say that Dawn, also called Aurora, loved him, and that Artemis, in jealous anger, shot him. Others say that he made Apollo angry, and that the god, by a trick, got his sister to slay him. After his death, he was placed in heaven as a constellation, which shows him with a girdle, sword, club, and lion's skin. The Pleiades. They were the daughters of Atlas, 7 in number. Their names were Electra, Maya, Taigete, Alcyone, Merope, and Celaeno Sterope. Orion pursued them, but they fled before him, and he could never seize any of them. Still he continued to follow them until Zeus, pitying them, placed them in the heaven as stars. But it was said that even there Orion continued his pursuit, always unsuccessful yet persistent. While they lived on earth, one of them, Maya, was the mother of Hermes. Another, Electra, was the mother of Dardanus and founder of the Trojan race. Although it is agreed that there were 7 of them, only 6 stars are clearly visible. The 7th is invisible except to those who have especially keen sight. Rhoecus, seeing an oak about to fall, propped it up. The dryad who could have perished with it told him to ask anything he desired, and she would give it. He asked that he wanted only her love, and she consented. She bade him keep on the alert, for she would send a messenger, a bee, to tell him her wishes. But Rhoecus met some companions and forgot all about the bee, so much so that when he heard one buzzing, he drove it away and hurt it. Returning to the tree, he was blinded by the dryad, who was angry at the disregard of her words and injury to her messenger. Salmoneus. This man was another illustration of how fatal it was for mortals to try to emulate the gods. What he did was so foolish, however, that in later years it is often said that he had gone mad. He pretended that he was Zeus. He had a chariot made in such a way that there was a loud clanging of brass when it moved. On the day of Zeus's festival, he drove it furiously through the town, scattering at the same time firebrands, shouting to the people to worship him, because he was Zeus the Thunderer. But instantly there came a crash of actual thunder and a flash of lightning. Salmoneus fell from his chariot dead. The story is often explained as pointing back to a time when weather magic was practiced. Salmoneus, according to this view, was a magician trying to bring on a rainstorm by imitating it, a common magical method. Sisyphus was king of Corinth. One day he chanced to see a mighty eagle, greater and more splendid than any mortal bird, bearing a maiden to an island not so far away. When the river god Sisyphus came to him to tell him that his daughter Aegina had been carried off, he strongly suspected by Zeus, and to ask his help in finding her. Sisyphus told him what he had seen. Thereby, he drew down upon himself the relentless wrath of Zeus. In Hades, he was punished by having to try forever to roll a rock uphill, which forever rolled back upon him. Nor did he help Sisyphus. The river god went to the island, but Zeus drove him away with his thunderbolt. The name of the island was changed to Aegina in honor of the maiden, and her son Aeacus was the grandfather of Achilles, who was sometimes called Aeacides, descendant of Aeacus. Tyro was the daughter of Salmoneus. She bore twin sons to Poseidon, but fearing her father's displeasure if he learned of the children's birth, she abandoned them. They were found by the keeper of Salmoneus's horses and brought them up by him and his wife, who called one Peleus and the other Neleus. Tyro's husband, Cretheus, discovered years later what her relations with Poseidon had been. In great anger, he put her away and married one of her maids, Cedaro, who ill-treated her. When Cretheus died, the twins were told by their foster mother who their real parents were. They went at once to seek out Tyro and discover themselves to her. They found her living in great misery, and so they looked for Cedaro to punish her. She had heard of their arrival, and she had taken refuge in Hera's temple. Nevertheless, Peleus slew her, defying the goddess's anger. Hera revenged herself, but only after many years. Peleus's half-brother, the son of Tyro and Cretheus, was the father of Jason, whom Peleus tried to kill by sending him after the Golden Fleece. Instead, Jason was indirectly the cause of his death. He had killed by his daughters under the direction of Medea, Jason's wife. We'll go ahead and end this episode here. But yeah, that takes us to part 7, which it speaks a bit on Norse mythology. We'll perhaps get a little more information than we did in the Prose Edda. But yeah, no, I doubt a whole lot. But let's see. It is, I think, 2 chapters at 20. 3 pages. So yeah, we're getting there. We're slowly getting there, but we're almost done. So we learned of a few more of the small characters of myth. Sisyphus, despite being a small myth, is well known as far as his punishment. Roll that rock uphill, but he could never do it because it would always roll back down. So yeah, it's actually a well-known one, even though it's a smaller myth. The Pleiades, part of the stars, the myth of how certain constellations came to be. And Orion, it's a constellation we know of today. But supposedly Orion was supposed to chase the Pleiades, and even in the sky. So as the Earth is turning, we see it looks like Orion's following the Pleiades, even though the Earth is turning. So yeah, it's an interesting little setup. Myrmidons. They're also connected to Aegina, which she was further connected to Orion, I think it. The Myrmidons. Yeah, Aegina, and I think it was there was another small story that connected to the story of Aegina. Oh yeah, Sisyphus. Sisyphus' story, because he told where Zeus was hiding her. Let's see. Marpessa. Yeah. And Linus. That's a name you'll often hear used a fair amount anymore. Leto. Which Delos. It creates the island. The woman who is made pregnant looks for somewhere to have her children. And Delos, the floating island, the island that isn't set anywhere, agrees to let her be there. So Letos lives there, and yeah, at some point it must have been changed to Delphi, because of course it's the temple of Apollo on Delphi. So yeah, but there's a few interesting stories there. But next chapter we'll be reading back up on our Norse mythology. Yeah. The stories of Signy and Sigurd. and the Norse gods. And that is the 2 chapters that are a part of it. Maybe it's 3 chapters. Introduction to Norse Mythology, Part 7. Okay, so it's 2 chapters, just a long introduction. And then all that's left is we have lineage charts. It gives the principal gods, starting out with heaven and earth, Uranus and Gaia. And they have Cronus, Rhea, Coeus, Phoebe, Ocean, aka Tethys. Or maybe, no, not, it's Ocean and Tethia. So those are the 3 groups. Now, a lot of incest, of course, because at that point in Greek history, who are your gods and titans going to be with? Besides mortals. And you got to remember, in the beginning, there's no mortals. Oh, Zeus, you could not keep it in your toga. The descendants of Prometheus, ancestors of Perseus and Hercules, ancestors of Achilles, House of Troy, the family of Helen of Troy, the royal house of the Thebes and Atreides, and the house of Athens. So yeah, those are the family lineages they have in there. But that'll end this episode. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.